Welcome to Get Rich Education. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold, with a two-part show. Real estate is a substantial input into homelessness. Why are people homeless? And why might you and I be partly responsible for it? In fact, the second part, in general, world-class cities don't make any sense to invest in for cash flow. New York, LA, DC, London, Singapore. But we're going to discuss one world-class city that actually does today on Get Rich Education. Fortunately for you, Congress has made it possible to get up to $200,000 out of your current 401k or TSP to invest in real estate or your own business, and that's even if you're still working. The thing is, you can get all this money tax-free. The EQRP is your secret weapon. With the CARES Act expiring soon, the EQRP company helps you unleash your retirement funds now. Learn more and text message QRP in all capital letters to 72,000.
You're listening to the show that has created more financial freedom than nearly any show in the world. This is Get Rich Education.
Here it is. Hey, you're inside GRE from Sarasota, Florida to Sarajevo in Bosnia and Herzegovina and across 188 nations worldwide. I'm Keith Weinhold. This is Get Rich Education. Even in the affluent United States, there is a large and growing population of vagrants, homeless people, more than 500,000 of them. And you and I, sometimes unknowingly, play a role in keeping them homeless. Well, why are people homeless? The number one reason is real estate related, so that's why I'm talking about it in the first of two show segments here. Let's look at the top 5 cited reasons that people are homeless. The fifth most common is substance abuse. We're talking about drugs here. The fourth is mental illness. The third is poverty. Okay, sort of an obvious one there. The second is unemployment. And the number one reason that people are homeless is real estate related. It is the lack of affordable housing. That's the number one reason people are homeless. Well, one mission here at GRE is that we provide society with affordable housing. But see, it's generally not the same kind of what I would call Class D, that lowest end housing that there is. And that's the sort of housing type that homeless people are looking to get into. Instead, we focus on properties just below the median housing price in some of those lower cost U.S. metros. We're talking about B-class and C-class assets, so a couple notches above where those people on the brink of homelessness would be. The homeless population is even more visible in my own home city since the pandemic, and perhaps in yours too, now that the unemployment rate is 10%. I'm going to tell you what contributes to homelessness. And a lot of this has to do with real estate. Contributors are carbon monoxide detectors, minimum wage, salamanders, NIMBYism, and over the long term, even rent control contributes to homelessness. Now, before we unpack all that, let's define homelessness. One of the better accepted definitions is a condition where people lack a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence. That is homeless defined. I think you and I can agree that homeless is actually not the best technical term, right? Because even if someone lives under a bridge, well, then that is their home. So houselessness would actually be more accurate. Vagrancy is an even better way to say it. A vagrant is a person without a settled home or a regular workplace that wanders from place to place and lives by begging. That's really what we're talking about here, but since homelessness is the widely understood term, we're going to go with that. Now, HUD, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, has a lot of statistics on the homeless, and as of 2018, they reported that there were roughly 553,000 homeless people in America on a given night. That's nearly 0.2% of the population, so what that really means is 1 in 500 Americans are homeless. Well, a lot of people, me included, believe that the real number of homeless is greater than this 553,000. In fact, private and local reports tell you that the homeless have increased 40% per annum in recent years. Yeah, 40% per year. One big mistake is that people think about the homeless as all one type, but there are so many different types of homeless. There are the temporary homeless that are just sort of passing through that 553,000 number. Some are voluntarily homeless. Others are really couch surfing because perhaps they were in a divorce or a domestic violence situation. Then you need to realize that about 2/3 of the homeless people are sheltered and 1/3 are unsheltered. Consider as well that there are at least 40,000 homeless veterans. To think that a person could have served this country, maybe even risked their life for this country, but yet they don't have a home in this country, that can be heartbreaking to think about. Now, though I'm not sure, I don't believe that a digital nomad would be considered among the homeless, like the laptop entrepreneur that stays at a different Airbnb location, say, each month. Before we bring in the real estate angle here, let's get some historical context. Just talking about the US here, homelessness emerged as a national issue in the 1870s, so about 150 years ago, and early homeless people lived in emerging urban cities like New York City. In the 20th century, the Great Depression of the 1930s caused a substantial rise in unemployment and these related social issues and distress and homelessness. And here more recently in the 21st century, it was the financial crisis of 2008 and its resulting economic stagnation and downturn. That's been a major driving factor and a contributor to rising homeless rates. And this is probably all happening again right now in the COVID pandemic. A Zillow report found that people in communities where the average renter spends more than 30% of their income on rent, meaning that those people can be described as being rent burdened, that they are particularly vulnerable to rapid increases in homelessness rates. Eviction obviously creates homelessness for a lot of people. Now, some naively think, well, can't we just raise taxes to build permanent housing for them and then just move them all in there? Well, I really doubt that that's a viable long-term solution because at some point, if taxpayer-funded housing is just provided for people for free, well, then people don't have an incentive to work and pay the rent. That's in general. Someone might have a disability that prevents them from making a living. Some think, now maybe we should impose rent control. Rent control means capping the amount of rent that a landlord can charge. I'll tell you, that could reduce the number of homeless people in some areas that have enough housing, but long-term rent control is a terrible plan because now an income property owner like you would have zero incentive to improve the property any longer. Longer-term rent-controlled areas fall into serious dilapidation, and because homelessness is concentrated in inner cities, it's those exact same big cities like New York that are the ones that have tried rent control. It does not work. So many areas that have tried to impose it have had to repeal it because it eventually turns areas into ghettos. What if you own property in an area where rent control were imposed? Well, even if you did improve your property, not only would you not get more rent for it, but you had better believe that property owners all around you would not be improving their property, and the entire condition of the neighborhood would be on a long downhill slide. You probably remember that I devoted an episode to the rent control topic. You can look that up on Get Rich Education, episode 192, if you're further interested there. One factor that contributes to higher housing costs, which prices people out of having any shelter and creates more homeless people, are environmental regulations that limit development in certain areas. Sometimes you need to leave an untouched development buffer alongside streams, or you can't build in areas that are wetlands in order to protect the flora and fauna there. A rare orchid, or a spotted salamander, or a threatened egret, or an endangered heron, they say that you can't build in their critical habitat areas. Sometimes you've got to protect them. But yet often it seems to be these same type of people that want more environmental regulations. They're the same people that say that they want more affordable housing options. Well, look, when you limit where you can build, now you've reduced the housing supply. And real estate pricing is highly susceptible to supply and demand factors, of course. All these wildlife protections limits the supply of housing. That makes prices go up, and that prices people out and makes more homeless people. And now maybe you're thinking I'm an anti-environmentalist. No, I'm not taking a side either way. It's just that one needs to understand the cost, and not just the short term, but the longer term ramifications of decisions that limit development in protecting the spotted salamander or whatever. I think it's easy to make a case that more biodiversity is better than less biodiversity, but the better question is, at what cost should we protect species? How far do we take it? Now, environmental regulations in America are intended to improve the quality of the environment and preserve ecosystems. That includes wildlife and protects human health too. But these regulations are often written without considering how much they will cost, especially long term. And another contributor to homelessness is excessive safety regulations. Again, some safety regulations are good, but how far do we take it? My gosh, when an area needs to build more affordable housing for people, which again is something that would reduce the homeless rate, and sheesh, a new home today might need 14 smoke detectors and 5 carbon monoxide detectors. And then the detectors need to be all connected to each other so that they can communicate with each other. And all these devices and all this added complexity increases the cost of housing. Well, that makes mortgage payments higher and rent payments higher, and it just prices more people out of the real estate market. The lower end of the income spectrum is the first to get priced out of this affordable shelter. And I'm not anti-safety either, but at some point one has to ask that question, how much safety do we really need? Even, how dare I say it out loud, what is the cost of a human life? There actually is an answer to that question. In fact, the EPA pegs the cost of a human life at $10 million. That is one of the highest of any federal agency. And then there's the entire question of how can you ever possibly monetize the value of a human life? You could make the case that it's priceless. That is a different discussion. But the point is, all these safety regulations increase the cost of housing and increase homelessness. Minimum wage does, in many instances, increase the homelessness rate long-term as well. And this might come as a surprise to you. You would think that raising up the minimum wage, well, that's got to be good. And that would have to decrease homelessness because a higher wage would mean that low-income workers could now afford some housing. Well, long-term, besides higher wages in an area creating inflation and soon making the cost of everything go up, including housing, think about it from the perspective of, now what if you were an employer and let's say you had to pay your workers a higher wage now that the minimum wage is stepped up to say $15 an hour. Well, if someone that works for you, they did make $9 an hour, but they only produced $12 an hour worth of productivity for you, well then this new minimum wage of $15 an hour, if that gets implemented, now you're losing money if you retain that worker. So now you need to lay them off. You would find ways to automate and innovate or make a machine do the work that the employee used to do. Well, that layoff increases homelessness. Just look at the number today of self-serve checkout kiosks in grocery stores. Well, all of those lanes used to be staffed by humans, and each one of them earned a wage. Well, with a raise in the minimum wage up to $15 an hour, you'd begin to see a trend where more fast food restaurants even have self-serve kiosks. You don't order from a human, you order from a computer. You're going to have fewer humans there. That's because some employers can't afford to pay people $15 an hour. Every self-serve digital kiosk that you see, that represents a laid-off worker. Well, hopefully this would incentivize people to learn new skills and get new skills and be worth more to an employer rather than just wait for the minimum wage to go up and wait for someone else to provide a job for them. I mean, talk to your parents or your grandparents, and they're going to tell you that gas stations used to be attended by human beings that would come out and pump your gas for you. They'd check your car's tire pressure. They'd check your fluid levels. Well, that service has been gone for a couple generations now. Now, an increase in the minimum wage, yeah, that would help get some people out of homelessness short term, but I'm giving you insight so that you can see both sides and see the long-term consequences of government intervention into the free market to help you have a better concept and idea of the cost of these things. Let's say that you're an employer at a warehouse and the minimum wage is $15 an hour, and you want to hire someone to help you sweep floors and do odd maintenance jobs around this warehouse that you own. Well, you know what? Now it's illegal for you to hire them at $12 an hour. And say you would love to give a kid a job and help him learn, but you can't make the numbers work at $15 an hour. So now he's unemployed because the government said to you, no, you cannot hire him at $12 an hour. That's what a $15 minimum wage says, so try looking at it from that angle. And another phenomenon that keeps people homeless is NIMBY, not in my backyard. NIMBYists are the ones that say, no, I don't want you to build low-cost housing in my neighborhood because I'm afraid that it's going to ruin the character of my neighborhood and it might stifle the rate of home appreciation here. In fact, Lafayette, California, it's a wealthy San Francisco suburb. It is nestled in Contra Costa County, where its residents have fought to stop what they call a very urban, unsightly 315-unit housing development. It was recently profiled by the New York Times over in the suburban community of Cupertino, California. Yeah, we're talking Silicon Valley now. Local activists spent years trying to stop the development of an abandoned mall and turn it into apartments, half of which would have been rented out to lower income tenants at below market rates. In Berkeley, California, activists often argue against new housing on the grounds that it's going to threaten their community's sustainable character. Well, what is another example of NIMBYism, not in my backyardism? At a recent zoning adjustment board meeting in Berkeley, I think one resident summarized NIMBYism really well here, and this was published in the New York Times. They said, Berkeley needs to provide a livable, sustainable environment for the people that already live there. And they said that when they were opposing a 57-unit development of student housing. They went on to say, we are not obligated to sacrifice what is best about Berkeley to build dorm rooms. That is the end of what they said. So NIMBY, this not in my backyard opposition to new housing development, it centers on concerns of property values and crime and gentrification and environmental sustainability. And even though it's often not their intent, the result of NIMBYism is that less housing gets built, housing costs go up, and homelessness rises. So let's draw some conclusions here and look at some actionable ways that you can make things better. Although it's not immediately apparent, carbon monoxide detectors, minimum wage, salamanders and egrets, rent control, and NIMBYism all go right through the heart of real estate investing and contribute to the long-term cycle of homelessness. A giant takeaway for you here is that what is the common denominator in all of these factors that I'm talking about? There is one common theme here. Do you know what that is? It is government intervention. Yeah, government intervention and interference in the free market, that's the contributor here. Excessive safety, minimum wage, protecting egrets and salamanders, rent control, and NIMBYism. Every single one of them. And now, maybe if you're a new Get Rich Education listener especially, you might be wondering, oh, am I some sort of anti-government guy where I think that the answer to everything is free market economics? No, not at all. Now, I do think that less government would be better in a lot of cases, but I think that some government regulation is good, probably just less than what we have now. For example, remember all the smoky, hazy pollution that you would hear about in places like Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in the 1970s? It was a hazard to your health just to walk through Pittsburgh then. You might have heard about this next one famously in the summer of 1969. An oil slick in Ohio's Cuyahoga River caught on fire because companies were committing rampant pollution. They were just dumping a lot of things into rivers. It was a hazard to human health. Well, government regulations like the Federal Clean Water Act of 1972 helped to clean that up, and those places are substantially cleaner and more livable now. So that's an example of regulation that helped. So government has a role here, but a lot of times it gets overly intrusive. When it comes to you helping the homeless directly, I like the campaign slogan that says, give real change, not small change. That means don't give money directly to panhandlers on the street. Where do you think that your money goes then? It probably goes straight to cheap Monarch vodka in those little plastic bottles that they buy. Also, if you don't want to see homeless people in your neighborhood, don't give them money if they're on your city street corner like they are mine, because what you've done is you've just given them an incentive to show up there again and do the same thing. So if you really care about these people, instead of small change, give real change. When you donate to your local homeless shelter or your soup kitchen, that's the real change. Your money is going to do more real good for the homeless there. It's going to provide them with shelter then, or educational resources then, or access to a computer so that they might be able to apply for a job. That is real change. So if you want to help the homeless, I think that's great. That is kind. Give real change, not small change. When it comes to NIMBYism and the environment, there is a great saying out there. What do you call a developer? Someone that wants to build a house. What do you call an environmentalist? Someone who already owns the house because they don't want anyone else to build there, right? Well, we avoid investing in coastal areas here at Get Rich Education. They are what I call generally the volatile markets. They have a history of more regulations, sometimes even rent control, and just more of these laws that are disadvantageous to property owners. Just more reason as to why we invest in the United States Midwest and South. They're what I call the stable markets. You're listening to Get Rich Education, episode 306. We are your source for independent, groundbreaking, original content on really three main topics. Real estate investing is what we major in, with minors in both wealth mindset and real estate economics. And Get Rich Education is not affiliated with any large media conglomerate. We're here to enrich you and sometimes even rescue you and help you survive in this widening difference between the haves and the have-nots that continues to broaden here in pandemic times. This show is also where you can find all of your finance heroes that have come onto the show to run alongside me for an episode here. Check our shows published over the years to find me here with best-selling finance author of all time, Robert Kiyosaki. He was here 3 times. The world's leading sales trainer, Grant Cardone. Global wealth mindset magnate, T. Harv Eker. And other economic minds and thought leaders, Jim Rogers, Jim Rickards, Sharon Lechter. All your favorite thought leaders are here on this show. And we have more of them coming onto the show in the future, including the upcoming Get Rich Education debut of success thought leader Hal Elrod and others. There is so much real estate and economics news right now during the pandemic, I've got to tell you, that is just being poured out to us, and it's more and faster than before. And we bring you a lot of that here on the show, but also be sure to subscribe to the Don't Quit Your Daydream letter. That is our wealth building email letter that you can get at getricheducation.com. A lot of times I can write you something in the letter and get it out faster to you than I can here on our weekly show. And yes, I do write the letter myself and I email it directly to you. There's never any spam. There's never any sharing of your email address with others, of course. Also, would you like to join me on a live webinar? We're looking at doing some of those soon. Look for those announcements in the Don't Quit Your Daydream letter as well. You get information, actionable resources, and education. Get a hold of that completely free at getricheducation.com. Again, what do you call a developer? That's someone that wants to build a house. What do you call an environmentalist? Someone who already owns the house. Hey, kind of exciting. Next, a world-class city where the real estate numbers actually make sense for you straight ahead. I'm Keith Weinhold. This is Get Rich Education. Property investors can get killed with maintenance costs. That's less likely when you buy brand new construction. Let me tell you about JWB Real Estate Capital in bustling Jacksonville, Florida. They pioneered the build-to-rent model where you can invest in new construction, turnkey rental property. That's why JWB was featured on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. To learn more and see inventory, start now at newconstructionturnkey.com. The people that our listeners can't stop talking about are Ridge Lending Group and MLS 42056. They provided you with more loans than anyone. It's where I got my last few loans, and they finance single-family income property up to fourplexes. They're the number one lender for both beginners and veterans. Start your pre-qualification, chat with President Chaley Ridge personally, and you'll end up with your custom plan for expanding your cash flowing portfolio. Start at ridgelendinggroup.com.
Hi, this is Russell Gray, co-host of the Real Estate Guys radio show, and you're listening to Get Rich Education with Keith Weinhold. Don't quit your daydream.
Today's guest owns companies in real estate property management, the lending space, and he also renovates and sells turnkey income properties. Specifically, he is in Chicagoland, but he specifically operates on the Indiana side of the state line, not the Illinois side. Daryl, welcome to Get Rich Education.
Hi, Keith. Thanks for having me on today.
Daryl, you've got something so interesting that you like to say, and you and I were talking about it before, and that is why you and I can't invest in real estate, but why you and I can. Tell us about that.
Oftentimes, we have a dream of investing in real estate and building passive income from real estate investments. And that's a very common theme. And a lot of people get enamored with it and they get into it. And it doesn't take them too long to get discouraged and to make mistakes and to hit pitfalls and basically to run out of time to where they realize that I can't do this. You know, I guess it's just an infomercial I watched or a book I read and I got fired up about it. But you get discouraged because you realize that you alone, you can't invest in real estate and be successful at it as a one-man show. You're going to need a lot of help. So I find that you can't invest in real estate.
And at the same time, you can. Yeah, so really, if one approaches it that way, they'll think they can't invest in real estate because they can't do it all themselves. I think it's a ridiculous proposition to consider doing it all yourself when you think of all the moving parts. But that's the I can't invest in real estate mindset, or maybe they're not well thought out, or maybe they jump into something and they approach real estate the wrong way, and then they say, oh, well, I guess real estate just doesn't work. But that's not true because, as you like to say, you and I can invest in real estate.
Well, sure, Keith. Yeah. I mean, you and I find that we can't invest in real estate because we start getting into it and we find, probably first and foremost that there's a great deal of market knowledge that we need in order to successfully invest in real estate. We'll find a property that we think will be good and we think it's going to be in a good area and we go ahead and make the investment. And oftentimes, especially as beginner investors, we find out that we didn't make the best decisions up front.
Yeah.
And we get in trouble on some acquisitions and we just did not have the market knowledge that we needed going in. There are people that have the financial ability to take some hits from making mistakes up front. And then there's people that aren't able to take those hits up front. And there's people that have a lot of time left in their life where they can absorb the time it took to recover from that mistake. And then there's people that are nearing the end of their life and they're approaching retirement and they really don't have the time to make bad choices and learn from it and gain the market knowledge they need in order to make good decisions going forward. So not having the proper market knowledge is one huge reason why we can't invest in real estate. And there's many other things. There's acquisitions. The professional real estate investors are out there snatching up all the good deals. They have all of the good inroads. You're kind of getting what's left over. And you end up taking what's there and it's not the best, but you try to make it work because every time you find a good property, it's gone before you get a chance to lock it up. You don't have the connections with the wholesalers, realtors actively bringing you deals. And then you do get that first deal and you get it under contract and then you find out that there's home inspectors that you have to work with and appraisers, and there's just contractors that you have to work with in order to rehab the property. And you don't have great connections with contractors built up, and you get into a bad situation with a contractor and you find out that all people are not ethical, and you get in trouble there. Or your project drags on and on and on because to that contractor, you're just one of many people that he's working for.
Right.
And there's many different contractors that you'll have to bring into a rehab: HVAC, electrical, plumbing, roofing, landscaping. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. All these connections that you have to make. And then if you want to hold a property as a rental property, well, then are you going to self-manage? You're going to manage it yourself? Do you have the time for that? Do you have the tenacity for that? Are you the right fit to be a property manager? Oftentimes we find that we're not. We're good people. We're nice people. And we expect other people to be like us. And a lot of times they're not. So that just all these things combine together and discourage us and make us realize that we just really can't follow our heart, follow our dream, and make this work and invest in real estate because we're trying to do it alone. Many times we find that we can't invest in real estate.
Putting together a team is somewhat of a job, certainly, but that is a surmountable obstacle. Trying to do it all oneself, that is incomprehensible to me, really. And a lot of people do jump in first and start with that property before they've built a team or they've even thought about the market that they're buying in. And when you buy a property, you're not even so much buying it for the tenant that's there now. When you think about the market selection, you're buying that property with a reasonable expectation that 18 to 24 or 30 months down the road or whatever it is, that another tenant is going to be able to come in and have a job and pay that rent income or greater.
Right. A lot of times we get discouraged as we're starting out investing in real estate, but the lessons that we learn are invaluable. The biggest lessons that I learned as far as from mistakes that I made early on is the necessity of having a great team of people that help you to make good decisions and invest in real estate and sort of navigate the real estate world. I think that's something that is a must when it comes to investing in real estate is having a great team around you. And that's what gives you the ability to where you can't invest in real estate if you try to go it alone, but you can if you and I do it together. And I'm just using I as that you don't necessarily have to do it with me, but just you have to have a good team that you're working with, I think, in order to be successful in investing in real estate.
And some teammates are less dispensable than others. A good title agent is good to have. A good home inspector is good to have. If you can't get the exact title agent that you want or the exact home inspector that you want, there's probably not too much of a fall off there to that second best one that you know of. But the property manager, a good property manager is like gold. And if you've got a good one, you really want to hang on to that team member. So not all team members are created equal, and their importance among those team members is different to you, the investor.
That is true, and it's so vital. And like you say, it is good to have a good title company that you're working with, but there are a lot of really good title companies. And you just find one that is adept at working with investors, and they'll probably work out pretty well. When it comes to home inspectors, if you're selling a property, you're hoping that a home inspector gets in there that is a reasonable human being and doesn't make it his life's passion to find everything he can wrong with your property. Across the board, home inspectors do a good job. And unfortunately, finding that good property manager is a little bit harder, but it's worthwhile the effort, and your effort to return ratio there is enormous. So if you happen to be saddled with a property manager that you just don't think is doing a really good job, or perhaps they're difficult to communicate with, they're not following up with you, and you see them making bad decisions and you see them not communicating well with you, it's time to begin shopping and find yourself a good property manager who has your best interest in mind. And I think you'll see a big difference there.
That's right. Getting a property manager recommendation through referrals is still my favorite way. And those referrals can come through online forums, or those referrals can come from people that are already doing business, investors that already have a relationship with that property manager. So really my point is, with the market and the team being more important than the property, I don't think you have to have every last team member lined up before you decide where you want to buy your property, but it does help to have that property manager and to have confidence in them before you start putting properties in your portfolio. I don't think you need to have the perfect home inspector before you need to buy a property, but that's sort of different when it comes to the manager being that glue that makes it all stick together. And when it comes to being a do-it-yourselfer, Daryl, and whether one wants to have no passivity in their investment or high passivity, on one end of the real estate investing, if you want to call it investing spectrum, I think of the fix and flipper that's out there scrounging around for deals themselves and is willing to take on all that risk of finding out what's really hidden inside a property when they go and fix and flip it. So that's one end of the spectrum, the no passivity end of the spectrum. And then the other end is what I call the high passivity end of the spectrum. That would be something like a REIT, which is something that's really more securitized like a stock. There you have high passivity, but you're going to have pretty low homogenized returns in the market with everybody else. So to me, really, I think of the sweet spot as something like turnkey real estate investing, where so many of the problems are already outsourced for you, but yet you get all the returns of direct ownership in real estate yourself.
Yeah, I know, I agree with you. And there's a good balance of passivity and control when you're investing in real estate and can put it under good property management.
Yeah.
And it really helps you navigate. It really helps you increase your returns if you can be involved in it some yourself. And that it gives you just enough hands-on to where you can help make some of the decisions, but you don't have to have this full-time job of managing this thing and making it happen from start to finish. So that's a good point.
Yeah, turnkey could really be a good balance of passivity. You introduce the word control and the rate of return as well. Any other thoughts on why you and I can't invest in real estate, but why you and I can?
Here's what I find about real estate is that real estate can be an excellent way to earn passive income, but only if you have somebody who's working very hard on your behalf to make it passive for you. It can be much like owning a company. And if you have great employees and great managers and they're doing the workload of the business, you as the business owner, you don't have to be there every day. You don't have to make all of the decisions, and you get a lot of reward from owning that company. The same thing is true with real estate. If you have some great team in place that's managing that asset for you, it can be a great thing to own. But it's only passive for you if somebody else is working very actively on your behalf for it. You and I alone investing real estate, it's very hard to do. But when you and I together, as we put this team together and we're working together, I find that we can do it together, what we can't do alone.
That manager creates a buffer between you and the tenant and even a buffer between you and the property, which helps you remove your emotions from it too. So there really are some pluses with having some control, but yet not that day-to-day involvement every day and the garage door's broken and you're getting a text about it. That doesn't do anything to increase your quality of life. But when that shows up on your monthly statement as a deduction, it just wasn't nearly as intrusive as it would be if you were the manager yourself.
Yes, exactly.
So we talk about markets and market vibrancy. Daryl, geography is less important than it's ever been in human history, ever. But in real estate investing, geography still matters. It really matters. And you operate in such an interesting geography because you are in Chicagoland. And as America's third largest city, Chicago, Illinois has these vast economies of scale. For real estate investors, it is a world-class city. Chicago has close to 10 million people in its MSA, and the city is just an efficient economic powerhouse. It's home to more than 400 major corporate headquarters, 36 in the Fortune 500 alone, and there are just so many diverse business sectors that play major roles in Chicago's economy. We're talking about finance and manufacturing, publishing, insurance, transportation, all kinds of services. Now, there's even a substantial food processing presence there in Chicagoland. The numbers actually work there. And you could not touch 1% rent-to-value ratios in some of these other world-class cities like you can in Chicagoland. You couldn't touch 1% in Metro New York City or LA or Berlin or London or Singapore. So tell us more about that in the market arbitrage and advantage that you have there in Chicagoland, Daryl.
Yeah, Keith, well, you've done a great job of promoting Chicago and the Chicagoland region, and all of that is true.
I've got my Cubs hat on. Not really.
Very good. One way that we leverage or arbitrage even on that is that while we are considered Chicagoland area, we're actually on the Indiana side. So even though Chicago and Chicagoland area is world-class area and a lot of benefits to being in that area with everything that it provides from good jobs and housing and transportation and all of that, we being on the Indiana side, just minutes from Chicago, honestly, but we're on the Indiana side, we benefit from being in a far more conservative state. So where my office is in Highland, Indiana, I can be at a White Sox game in 35 minutes. I can be to a Chicago Cubs game, which I would far rather go to a Chicago Cubs game, in just over an hour, maybe an hour and 15 minutes. So we're very close to all of Chicagoland area, but we're on the Indiana side where there's a much lower cost of living. Housing is much more affordable. What we have in our area here on the Indiana side is a huge influx of people that are basically fleeing the higher cost of living just on the Illinois side and coming into Lake County, Indiana, just across the border. They can literally move 20 minutes from where they were living at to a new house, and they can rent a house from us where they get at least 1/3 bigger house for about 1/3 less rent. And in many cases being in a nicer neighborhood and just having a better school system and everything better across the board, and only having a very marginally longer commute time to where they're currently working. We're benefiting from that as a property management company, being on the Indiana side, right across the border from Chicagoland.
With apologies to Chicago Southsiders, yes, the Cubs are just a more popular team than the White Sox. So we're just telling the truth. But yeah, we're talking about Lake County, Indiana, and some of those communities that you operate in where you can get those advantageous 1% or even more than 1% rent to value ratios include places like Highland, Indiana, like you mentioned, Hammond, Indiana, Maryville, Indiana, and so on. And you specifically stay on the Indiana side of the state line. Well, a lot of people think about Chicagoland. They're not even thinking about the Indiana side and how you can exploit this arbitrage and pay lower property tax in Indiana and get more home for your dollar. Indiana, like you mentioned, it is business friendly. U.S. News placed Indiana recently number 3 in housing affordability and then number 2 in overall affordability. Forbes ranks Indiana as one of the top 10 states to do business. So you really have a lot of advantages there, being in the suburbs and operating with turnkey single-family homes. We know that's been a trend for a while with people moving across the line to help exploit this disparity and a better quality of life with a lower cost of living. Have any recent developments, like COVID developments, helped exacerbate that trend to an even greater degree, Daryl?
It's probably a little bit early to say that with any authority. We always have a bigger push for our rental properties in the summertime. There's always that added push. We are used to our homes renting quickly. We are used to our homes selling quickly in the summertime, and then perhaps tapering off around between Thanksgiving and New Year. But we are feeling like that this year, the COVID-19, the pandemic, and the way that particularly the governor of Illinois and the mayor of Chicago, which affects all of the Chicagoland area, we are thinking that the way that they're handling the pandemic is aggravating an already aggravated population. People are just absolutely fed up with everything that's going on there anyway, and you can do a minimal amount of research and see that people are exiting Illinois by the droves, and they're going to Minnesota, they're going to Wisconsin, they're going to Indiana, they're going up into Michigan even. But I do feel like that with the pandemic that it's even aggravated that further. And we literally are renting houses without even listing them because we have a waiting list of people waiting for the next house to be available. We're selling houses without even marketing them because we have turnkey investors that are waiting for the next house to be available for them to buy. We have homeowners that are, the second we put the property on the MLS, it's very common for us to get 4 to 6 showings the very first day and an offer within a day or two, full price, sometimes over full price. Honestly, Keith, we're even selling houses that we originally bought them to be turnkey homes. We're putting them on the MLS
Yeah.
for $5,000 more than we're planning to sell them as a turnkey investment, and selling them in a matter of a couple of days. So we are seeing just a large appetite for the homes that we have here, whether for rent or for sale.
The de-densification trend has been seen in some metro areas, but yeah, it's still a little early. Real estate is a slow-moving business. It takes some time for numbers to accumulate and be reported and so on. However, we do know that even pre-pandemic here, Illinois had a net out-migration of more than 100,000 people, and you're right across the line, right across the border. Only New York and California have more annual net out-migration than Illinois does. Tell us more about those properties. I know you offer renovated single-family home. Tell us about the average rent income, purchase price, and more.
Generally speaking, if we're selling a house for $125,000, we are renting it for $1,350.
That's
So
great.
we're beating that 1-to-1 ratio all day long. I don't know of a property that we've put out there for sale in the last year that didn't beat that ratio by a significant margin. We are mainly buying single family homes. From time to time, we'll be able to get a duplex or a quadplex or something like that. But generally, they're single family homes. We stay in middle class America. We try to find areas where a lot of home buyers are buying homes. So we want it to be a good ratio, at least 50-50, and in many cases, 60 or 70 to 40 or 30 of home buyer versus renters, because we want these homes for our investors that are buying turnkey rentals. We want them, if they did want to sell the property in 3, 4, 5 years or whatever, they can turn around and they can just put it on the MLS and sell it to a home buyer. These are not rental only areas. We invest in areas where there's good school systems, there's low crime, there's pride in ownership, where you can see people are taking good care of their houses, good care of their neighborhoods. And what we're getting from that is we're getting a tenant who is the best of the pool of tenants that we have to choose from. Your best tenants with solid income and good character. They want to live in good neighborhoods. They want to live in good homes, and they want to send their kids to good schools, and they want to have good restaurants to eat in. They want to have nice stores to shop in, and they want to have good grocery stores. And all that comes in middle class America. From that, you get a tenant that's willing to pay up in order to get a better home. They're willing to stay longer in that home because they want stability in their life. Those are the areas that we invest in. We don't do anything in like the lower income, so to speak, neighborhoods. We stick in strictly blue collar, middle class America here in Northwest Indiana.
And we've been working together for almost 2 years. I have seen what your rehabs look like, and they really do look terrific. You rehabilitate, tenant, and then keep the property under management turnkey, like we talked about the value of the team previously. So you really do make that experience easy for that investor that wants direct ownership and wants control, but yet not the day-to-day involvement.
That's exactly what we do. In our rehab, we really focus on structural and mechanical. We do that up front. You're not going to want to buy a rental property and here it is. It looks nice. It's painted fresh. It has new flooring in it, has some sparkle to it. And, 1 year into owning the property, your furnace needs to be replaced. That's not a good experience for an investor to have. So
Right.
We start the rehab with focusing on any structural or mechanical issues, electrical, plumbing, all of that. We get that all taken care of. In most cases, it's new. In some cases, it's just been gone through to make sure that, barring anything unforeseen, there shouldn't be any major capital expenses in 7 to 10 years on this property. And then we go from there to the cosmetic, and we make it a very appealing home for somebody to live in from there. But we take care of mechanical and structural up front.
If you want to learn more about potentially investing in turnkey single-family homes in Chicagoland, go to getricheducation.com/Chicago and connect with a provider there. What this really is, it's a rare opportunity to invest in a world-class metro. It's just an opportunity you can find in exceedingly few other places, like we talked about before. And you as an investor are as diverse as the markets that you're inside. And there are a few ways to think about that. Maybe say you're investing in Huntsville, Alabama. That's a cash flow market, and it's got a lot of upside to it, but it's small. For example, here in Chicago, there are just exceedingly few places where you can build a portfolio in a world-class metro. So I really want to thank you for coming on, Daryl, and telling us more about it. It's been great having you here on the show.
Thanks, Keith. Appreciate you. Have a great day.
You know, one thing that I like about this provider is that he's so plain spoken. It's my job here to look around the nation and the world for top markets and providers. I've found that Northwestern Indiana is one of those, and it seems like I'm all excited about this investment opportunity in the submarket of Chicagoland here. And some providers, when they're a guest here, they really focus on kind of talking up, promoting their market, which is fine, and they should. But this provider is so understated, saying that, for example, it's too early to tell if the pandemic is accelerating this already existing migration trend out of high-class Illinois, just across the state line, and into Indiana. You've got to love that about them. And yes, I know my Chicago Cubs history. I even ate at the Cubs Grill inside Chicago O'Hare Airport last month, from Ernie Banks to Ron Santo to Ryan Sandberg. I know my Cubs. Now, Illinois isn't completely dry of opportunity, of course, but it is a high-cost, high-tax state. A lot of people just don't know that Chicagoland is partly on the Indiana side of the state line, where residents can rent that bigger house at a lower rent amount in a better school system with lower taxes. You pay lower property taxes there, too, as the investor than you would on a comparable Illinois home. So this is an opportunity for you to provide housing to renters there. You're still in Chicagoland, so you get some of those benefits of a diversified economy. And these single-family homes, sometimes a duplex or fourplex, they meet or often exceed that 1% rent-to-price ratio. Again, a typical single-family home rents for $1,350 at a purchase price of only $125K. That's almost 1.1%. This is middle-class America, in neighborhoods where you have 50 to 60% homeowners in these safe neighborhoods. And more than a dozen Get Rich Education listeners have already bought there, and some are buying multiple properties with these investor advantage numbers. If you're serious about putting more properties in your portfolio, get started at getricheducation.com/Chicago. Mortgage rates are lower than they've ever been in United States history, so take advantage of this. You can't make any money from the property that you don't own? Take action and get started at getricheducation.com/Chicago. Until next week, I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. Don't quit your daydream.
Nothing on this show should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions of guests are their own. Information is not guaranteed. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss. The host is operating on behalf of Get Rich Education, LLC exclusively.
The preceding program was brought to you by your home for wealth building, GetRichEducation.com.